start with a question. How many of you sleep? So it sort of means that it's applicable to all of you. How many of you don't sleep?
Subjective question.
And we'll talk about subjectivity in a bit. But essentially, humans need sleep to survive, just like every other animal on the planet. So what I'm going to do today is talk to you specifically about what my area of research is, which is insomnia. So I look at why people cannot sleep. I'm a psychologist by trade, but also a clinician. So it's important for me to get people out of my clinic. They mess up the place, they make it look dirty. I want them out of my clinic, so I want to cure them as quickly as possible. So, I think the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, what's sleep? Can anyone tell me, when you've obviously, some of you have seen other people sleeping by now, what does it look like? Well, it does look quiet, that's true. What else does it look like?
Peace, death.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as that. It's quite a nice way to look at it.
Edgar Allan Poe said, sleep those little slices of death, how I loathe them.
He did indeed. But I think he probably had several issues. So, why do I study insomnia? What's the most important thing? Oh, well, not that for a start. Let's just do it that way. Why is insomnia important? Why would we want to bother preventing it in the first place? Well, if we look at just some basic statistics, it is the most cited health complaint worldwide. More people will go to see their GP about insomnia than they will about pain, anxiety, depression, or any other physical symptom. About 15% of the general population worldwide, so not just in my area, suffer from a chronic form of insomnia. In other words, they can't sleep. They try and try and try, and they just cannot get to sleep. We now know that insomnia and a lack of sleep generally is related to type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, cancer. Previously, we'd always thought that these were secondary issues. The sleeplessness comes along with the diabetes. It comes along with the cancer. Well, if you take a normal, healthy adult male, you deprive him of sleep for 4 nights, he will start to develop type 2 diabetes. It shows all the hallmark profiles of somebody with type 2 diabetes. So we're starting to now see that insomnia causes illnesses. What's really interesting is that it is the single biggest predictor of major depression. The first time somebody ever becomes depressed, we see that the insomnia comes first. Now, I'm actually going to show you some data later on collected from my own lab, which is actually demonstrating for the first time the relationship between depression and insomnia. We know that people who don't sleep very well, they have a lot of marital discord. They tend to slap their partners a lot and get slapped back. They tend to not turn up to work or to college or to school or to university. Actually, they don't turn up anywhere. They're usually lying underneath something. And of course, we see an awful lot of work-related accidents. 25% of all road traffic accidents are, in some respect, caused by a sleep problem. So this is a huge phenomenon. But as a healthcare professional, I'm also interested in money. I love money. How many of us love money? Money is good. Now, the thing is unfortunately, I don't get the money back from the NHS. But what we do know is that annually in the United Kingdom, we prescribe 10 million sleep medications. That is 10 million sleep medications are given out every single year. And that doesn't account for some of us who want to go out and get plastered instead and fall asleep that way, which is actually really, really bad for you because you look really grim in the morning. Now, this is costing the United Kingdom £15 million a year. The NHS spends £15 million a year on medication for sleep. It's a big problem, isn't it? Very recently, we found that there is a 4-fold increase in mortality if you use sleep medication. If you use sleep medication, you are 4 times more likely to die early. I didn't say this was going to be the brightest talk. I just said it was going to be inspirational. Inspiration can sometimes be cruel. So this is why prevention of insomnia is actually quite important. If you can deal with insomnia before it becomes chronic, then you can avoid all of these problems. The coronary heart disease, the cancer, the accidents, the laid off work, the medication use, the death. I quite like to avoid death. So, the first thing that we've got to do is understand what actually is insomnia. Well, I'm going to go back to a bit of theory by a very, very clever man from New York. Not all clever men come from New York. But this one's actually very clever. Art Spielman. Art Spielman suggested that insomnia is made up of 3 main things. He says that there is something called a predisposing characteristic. Can anyone tell me what they think a predisposing characteristic is? I know we're warming up.
A characteristic that plays a part in something before it actually happens.
Absolutely. So it's something that's inside the individual that makes them more vulnerable. So in other words, really, Spielman is using a really fancy word to say personality or genes. Something in your biology makes some people more likely to have insomnia than others. Now, according to Spielman, what we have is you've got this vulnerability, and then some event pushes us over the limit. It taxes us. How many of you have done psychology? How many of you have done Cellier? I would hope so. If you've done Cellier, this is a perfect example of his adaptation syndrome. The individual is taxed beyond their ability to cope. And so one of the responses, a normal biological reaction to stress, is not to sleep. Evolutionarily, when we're under pressure, it's no good for us to sleep, is it? Imagine if a man with an axe walked in here now. How many of you think, oh, I'll just have a nap? Just have a lie down, get a duvet, a nice hot chocolate or something. Yeah, it's going to be great, it's going to be fun. It's very unlikely that you would want to just have a little nappette whilst there's a man with an axe running around. So biologically, we have to be alert. If we're under pressure, we're under threat, we have to be alert. And to be alert, you need to be awake. So this is what Spielman calls the precipitant, something pushing us over the edge. Now, according to Spielman, as we know from Cellier and Cannon and all of our stress researchers, eventually the stressor itself diminishes. The stressor itself goes away. You've packed up that man out of your life and you've thrown him out. You've got a new house, you've got a new job. Something takes over and changes the stressor. As we can see, the stressor here is still making you have insomnia, this period of sleeplessness, but it's got lesser from this point. This is where Spielman suggests new things come in. We no longer worry so much about the stress, but we start to use psychological and behavioral factors to reinforce the level of sleepiness that we've got. He calls this the perpetuation of insomnia. Eventually, our chronic population, the stress is gone. That's no longer featuring. But what's maintaining the insomnia, what keeps it going, is behavior. We do things which keep the insomnia going. We think things, we feel things, and we do things. This is the cycle of insomnia. Now, of course, I'm not really interested in this. I have to see patients every week to deal with this bit, and it's messy. It's horrible. So I want to deal with this bit. I want to see how we can prevent people from going to the last dimension by dealing with this dimension. You'd think that was easy, just get rid of the stress, wouldn't you? It's not, and that's why I'm a scientist. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, when you're going through this stressful period, do you actually think about your sleep at all? Does it matter to you? How many of you have got a car? This is a rich group. Now, I recently went and bought myself a snot green car. You've heard this one before, ladies. I bought myself a snot green car because I love it. I have to say, it's fantastic. Now, I'm going to go and pick up my snot green car from the showroom. As I'm going to the showroom, I'm passing over the Newcastle Tyne Bridge, and I see a snot green car. Woo! Drive a little bit further. Oh, another snot green car, and another, and another. Now, do we think that every person on the planet decided to drive their snot green car just because I'm going to go and pick mine up? Do you think there was some sort of parade going on? No.
No.
Why do you think I noticed all of the snot green cars?
Because you have one, so you've
You were
got to
thinking about
look
it,
out for it.
Because I'm primed to think about it. I'm constantly thinking about my snot green car. I am more likely to attend to or see other people's snot green cars. We can see that this also exists in a lot of psychopathology or mental illnesses. We can see, for example, that when you give an alcoholic lots of pictures of bottles, they will interpret them as alcohol bottles as opposed to pill bottles, sauce bottles, or other types of bottles. So what the first thing that we wanted to do is find out, does this actually exist within insomnia? We can see that depressed people are more likely to notice sad faces, but do people with insomnia have an attention or focus on sleep? So what we did for this particular experiment is two parts to it. We first wanted to take a measure in the general population of how much people think about their sleep. Okay? How much do you think about sleep? About 4 o'clock this afternoon, you'll all be thinking about sleep. Or probably now, you're thinking, oh God, just die. Now, we've got a good measure. So we've taken people who say that they're good sleepers, people who say they're average sleepers, and people who say they're really poor, rubbishy sleepers. And what you can see is, just looking at the top half, there is a linear relationship. The poorer you sleep, the more you think about your sleep. The more you attend to information in the environment, you interpret information in the environment about sleep. Well, that's all well and good. Yeah, that's one of those no... Am I allowed to say shit? Excellent. It's a no shit Sherlock moment. I love those in science. So we've got that. So what we wanted to do next is actually see, can we manipulate and make somebody have a period of acute insomnia and see if it changes them in terms of their attention to sleep. So what I did is got some baseline measurements. This is a class of nurses and midwives that I used to teach. I was very nice. These people are really lovely compared to me. So I was teaching nursing. I had my midwives and my nurses. I gave them my questionnaire on their levels of attention bias. And as we can see, their general attention bias is somewhere between normal to average. Then what I did, quite unkindly, was told them that they had a series of exams, their finals, 6 weeks early. That's enough to make somebody lose a bit of sleep. If somebody told you that your exams have been brought forward by 6 weeks, do you think you might have a few issues? A little stress, a little sleeplessness? Yeah. So, during the exam period, what we notice here is that their levels of attention towards sleep get bigger. So we've created or experimentally manipulated their level of insomnia, and we can see it relates to their levels of attention. This is suggesting that even in the early phases of a sleep problem, there is a psychological component which is not directly related to the stress. It's actually related to the sleeplessness. So we've got a point of intervention. We can do something about it. Now, of course, unfortunately, believe it or not, worldwide, there has been £50 billion worth of research money spent on insomnia to date. How much of this has been spent on prevention? £495,000. And it all came to me. How fantastic is that? It made me very, very, very popular with my boss for about a week. Now, the first thing that I wanted to ask is, well, we don't know much about this acute insomnia thing, so we don't even know how people sleep. They might sleep really well. They might just be miserable. So the first thing I want to ask myself is, how do people with acute insomnia actually sleep? So to do that, I use my laboratory. I have a fantastic laboratory where I get to do all of my evil experiments at night. As you can see here, this is known as a polysomnogram. So what we do is we stick electrodes all over someone's body and then tell them to go to sleep. And then we watch them through infrared cameras, and then we sell it on eBay. Essentially, a polysomnogram is an electro recording of brainwave activity, muscle movement, cardiac movement. We also want the legs, just to see if they've got any particular shaky leg syndrome. And we also stick something up their nose, but that's just for a laugh. So what we do is we stick electrodes all over the head, 12 places around the head. She's got off very lightly, she's got one. This is called a promotion. Come to the laboratory, we only stick one there. When, by the time they finish, they look like Frankenstein's monster. So we do this polysomnogram, and we usually do it for 2 nights. Why do you think we do it for 2 nights, not just 1 night?
In case the one night was a one-off.
It's a good point, because the first night is not or may not be representative. How many of us go home of an evening and you have your tea and you get yourself ready for bed, and then you want to just stick 12 electrodes on your head, 2 on your legs, 3 on your chin, 3 on the forehead, 2 on the chest, 2 on your legs, or put a band round and something up your nose?
Sounds like a fun night, yeah?
If you are a fan of Star Trek, you would end up looking like the Borg, and I quite enjoy that. I do it at home. Let's not go there. So essentially, the reason we do the second night is because this night is not real. It's not normal for someone to have this happen to them of an evening, unless they're paying cash. What do we get at the end of it? Well, we get something that looks like this, and I'll talk about what that is in a second. But this is known as a hypnogram. And this tells us when somebody is asleep or awake, but it also tells us some very interesting things about the stages of sleep that they're in. So, let's have a look. at the architecture of acute insomnia populations? Well, in terms of our acute insomnia, they're in red. Our normal sleepers who have been matched by age and gender are our people in blue. We can see that they are not identical in some respects. You don't really expect that because there's individual differences in how we all sleep. The percentage of REM doesn't change. There's no differences in REM. What do we know about REM? What does it mean to you?
Rapid eye movement, dreaming.
Rapid eye movement, dreaming. Now here's a little fact for you. If you're dreaming and it's in colour, you're in REM. If you're dreaming and it's black and white, you're not in REM. You can actually dream outside of the REM period. Woohoo! Yes, I know, something exciting for the pub. So we can see there is no effect on the colour dreaming for our individuals. REM is also the period by which we consolidate memory. It's the only time that our body uses transmitters in the brain to store memories. And that's why some of us believe that dreams are essentially getting rid of all the crap that we don't need. If you think about it, is it really that important for me to remember that that colour is blue? Is it? Am I going to need that for a crisis in my life? Probably not. So of course, during sleep, my brain is going to say, do I need to know that that was blue? No, I don't. So it's going to chuck that bit out. But it is going to remember things like, hopefully, my credit card numbers and where I'm meant to be in the morning and where I left my car keys. So percentage of REM, no problem. N3, which is also known as slow wave sleep. Slow wave sleep is about restitution of the body. It is the only time that the immune system is actively working through the parasympathetic branch. We can see that there is a significant difference here. Actually, I'll bring them both up. There is a significant difference with people with acute insomnia showing that they don't get as much slow wave sleep. So they're not as restful in terms of health as our normal sleepers are. The trade-off to that is something known as N2, or stage 2 sleep. Stage 2 sleep. What is stage 2 sleep? Okay. How many of us lie in bed and we get to that comfortable position, we're like, yeah, shut up, shut up, and then suddenly we have a little jump. Anyone done that? It's known as the hypnopompic jerk. You can use that, it's free. It's known as the hypnopompic jerk. It is the transition from this stage, stage 1, which we don't actually know anything about. It has no purpose for humans. That's why babies don't do it, but they're aliens. Another story, another day. The transition to real sleep happens between stage 1 and stage 2. And it's that little hypnopompic jerk that gets rid of all of the cortisol and stress hormones in the body so that you can start to sleep efficiently. But what do we know about stage 2? Well, stage 2 is the period whereby we're getting ourselves ready so that we can have lots of slow wave, so that we can fix our bodies up. We don't need a lot of it. All we need is for the brain to shut off parts of the body. That's what stage 2 sleep does. It shuts off parts of the body so they don't interrupt you anymore. And that's why when somebody's really, really, really asleep, you can paint them. Try it, it works. So this stage 2 is just a barrier between sleep and wakefulness. But what we see is in acute insomnia, it's elongated because they're not getting to sleep. They're not being able to get from wakefulness into the slow wave. This is a big issue. It means that people with acute insomnia are sleeping lighter. Therefore, they're not getting restitution. Now, the next thing that I wanted to do is see what happens when somebody goes into the chronic. Remember we talked about the Spielman thing, and there was the end bit where people are chronic, and there's people that are still in the acute period. Let's have a look at differences based upon that. Well, we can see two main differences. When we look at people who are normal sleepers and people who have acute insomnia but it goes back to normal, they're averaging out about 95 minutes before they hit their first REM cycle. People who go chronic hit about 63 minutes. So they go into REM PDQ, whereas normally it takes you quite a while to get there. The other main difference that we see is in terms of how much slow wave we're getting. Normal sleeper, they get about 17% of the whole night. Somebody who's acute but will go back to being normal, they're on 11. Somebody who's chronic is actually on 7. Now, I have got money in my wallet. Can anyone tell me what this also is a biological marker of? I will give you cash.
External stress.
It's a good point. It's actually a really good point. And that's the next thing that you'd want to look at, isn't it? Is it the stress that's causing this? No, it's not. The stress is exactly the same between those who go normal and those who become chronic in terms of life events and in terms of their perceived stress. So it's not about the stress. So what is this? It's a very clear biomarker of the first onset of major depression. When we are trying to diagnose major depression, one of the things that we do is look at the sleep. And we know that between 60 and 65 minutes to enter into REM is usually a very clear indicative marker of first onset major depressive disorder. This is therefore suggesting that the insomnia comes before the major depressive disorder. The other accompaniment is the slow wave, and we also see the slow wave goes reduced down to about 6 to 7% in people who have major depressive disorder. So we're actually for the first time demonstrating this. As I said, it's not due to the stress. So what can you do? If you're faced with something, a period of stress, which is making you not sleep, the first thing you have to do is detect it. Recognize it's an issue, but it's a normal biological reaction to stress. 2, distract. Think about other things. Don't think about the sleep itself. Don't try to sleep. The harder you try to sleep, the less likely you are to sleep. All of you, I don't want you to think about a pink elephant right now. How many of you have got a pink elephant going on? Yeah. Detach from the bed. No using the bed inappropriately. I always have 2 rules. You can use the bed for sleep and for sex. And although I prefer it in clinic if you use the kitchen. No napping, no lying in. If you're in bed for more than 15 minutes and you're not asleep, you've got to get out of the bed. That is the golden rule. So if your sex takes 15 minutes, good on you, sunshine. And no turning the bedroom into your nest. You're not allowed to start eating in there, drinking in there, having friends over, parties, pizza, none of that. All right, I'm going to leave it there, and thank you very much.